What's up, Tasty Nation? Mike here from Tasty Live, joined by our very special guest, Kevin Davitt from the Nasdaq. Kevin, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for being on. So we've got this question at hand, or I should say this thesis at hand. As far as I've been a trader, as long as I've been a trader, over 10 years now, I've always thought as the benchmark for comparison. Like if I'm trying to beat a benchmark, if I'm an active trader, what am I trying to exceed in terms of returns? That's always been the S&P 500 for me. Whether I'm making more than the S&P, on par with the S&P, losing less than the S&P, like that I think is the goal if you're active trading, because the alternative is passive investing in something like maybe the S&P or the Nasdaq 100 specifically, NDX. You have this thesis that in the future, maybe, just maybe, the new benchmark will be the Nasdaq 100.
So you're generally on to something that I believe fairly strongly in. And just to be clear, for years, like when you started trading, I worked in this industry helping educate people around use cases for S&P 500 options. And a handful of years ago, I had an opportunity to do similar work, but with an emphasis on the Nasdaq 100. And in my mind at that time, and I continue to believe it right now, I thought there is the potential for, at the time I had an 8-year-old, now he's 11 going on 12, for his generation to look at the Nasdaq 100 as that sort of clear equity exposure. You were talking about what's beta, and the S&Ps are a 1 beta exposure, and there is a ton of passive dollars designed to track it. Traders care about overall performance and a variety of, not necessarily just passive equity exposure. And going back even further, I think that there has been an evolution over the past handful of decades in the kind of key reference asset for option traders. I'm old enough to remember when people talked about the OEX, the S&P 100, apologies. That has subsequently moved, and the overwhelming emphasis is on the S&P 500 these days. I can very much envision a day where that transitions to NDX and the Nasdaq 100 because of the index construction and because over time things change. That's invariably the case.
Yeah, and I think nowadays you've got very concentrated names leading the top of really all lists. Like there's very few ETFs now. When you think about the concept of an ETF, it was more about balance and having a handful of names that run that ETF or are within that ETF in a kind of balanced way. Now you look at a lot of these companies that have gotten so big and so powerful that there's not really a way to differentiate unless you have a flat distribution product. Like these companies have naturally led the way, and I think that might be the point that you might be making here.
Indexing through time rewards winners. Mm-hmm. And if people want equal weight exposure, you can get equal weight S&Ps, you can get equal weight Nasdaq 100. I would argue that big picture, returns have historically been driven by a handful of names. Now, the length of time that we have seen the names that most people do associate with the Nasdaq 100, the Nvidias, the Teslas, the Amazons, the Alphabets, they have dominated for years. But I would also, in that same sentence, argue that the Nasdaq 100 is much broader and more meaningful than your sort of basic framework around that. I think about technology being kind of like a hectagon. It's got like 100 sides, and that sort of number is intentional. The Nasdaq 100 includes names like Walmart and Costco, which we've talked about in the past, Pepsi, Starbucks, Booking.com. The Nasdaq 100 is also Marriott, ADP, CSX, the railroad company. It's Mondelez, it's Ross Stores, it's Baker Hughes, and Diamondback Energy. Now, those are probably not names that you would initially equate with the Nasdaq 100. My point is, it's broader than you probably think, and that technology has gradients that filter down across the U.S. economy, and that's one of the primary reasons I can see passive dollars increasingly flowing into the Nasdaq 100, When I then think about options-based exposure, there's a handful of dynamics that I think could push or are increasingly explaining the continued growth in NDX options. When we've talked in the past, said, well, this is a strategy I have historically employed using SPX options. And you've increasingly started to say, well, I could do similar stuff in the Nasdaq 100. I believe that is happening at a very broad-based level. The handful of things that are, in my opinion, driving this, NDX have daily expiring options. Those have grown significantly in the past handful of years, just like a number of other index products. It has a high notional value. Now, that can cut both ways, but for traders that are looking to employ levered approaches, a high notional, so you think about Nvidia or Tesla historically, or some of the names pre-split, what was driving that was the fact that they had a whole lot of notional exposure in one option. That is an appeal that is in place with NDX. And volatility. Volatility to your audience and to a growing number of option users is equated with opportunity as opposed to purely with risk. They understand that it's a measure of how much a value moves around a mean over a given time frame. And the Nasdaq 100 has historically moved with slightly greater velocity than other index benchmarks. Now, if I'm looking to potentially own optionality, I benefit from something that statistically is more likely to make a big move. If I turn that around and say I would like to potentially capitalize on short option premium, the higher historical volatility associated with NDX translates into higher implieds. And on what we see overwhelmingly is spread-based defined risk exposures. On like exposures, you are going to take in higher premium dollars relative to other index alternatives. And I think increasingly that story is being understood by the Tasty audience and others.
Absolutely. And I think regardless of the time frame you look at, simply because NDX moves at a slightly higher realized volatility clip, you do get those premiums. And the nice thing about the sophisticated option strategies that you can deploy is that it doesn't matter what your account size is, really. Like, and the fact that they have differing expirations, they've got differing strike prices, just like anything else you'd imagine, you can get into defined risk credit spreads, debit spreads, butterflies. That's what we were talking about before, is like, I really like the butterflies in NDX and SPX because you have the ability to get a defined risk nature to the strategy. You don't lose the full premium unless you literally expire out of the money, but indirectly, the closer you get to expiration, if nothing happens, the better it is for you if it does happen, because that's when you really can get the full value of the spread out of it.
You nailed it. We see overwhelmingly spread-based trading because end users are working with finite capital, just like you and I, and they want to be able to spread and manage risk in a defined way. So just putting a simple number around that, about 75% of the volume that we see overall is spread-based. And that is by and large typically 10 or slightly wider point spreads in relatively near-dated options. And a 10-point spread is a 10-point spread across products. And so again, going back to that point on volatility, option traders, sophisticated, tasty end users understand that volatility can be a real benefit to a variety of option strategies.
Yeah, and I think really when it comes to NDX specifically, the thought of being right with every single pick you have on a single name product is tough to do. It's easier to have a sector analysis of being like, oh, AI, I can see this going in a certain way over a number of different products, and some of those products will chop up and down, but maybe hopefully you're right in the direction you choose. Or from a neutral standpoint, you can be like, hey, this range equates to these products that are, concentrated in NDX being in this kind of band. I want to capture that band. Maybe Nvidia has earnings, they blow it out of the water. Maybe Microsoft's not so much. So you have that kind of balancing act, and it just gives you a better flexibility and a cash settled product where you have the flexibility of really deploying what you want.
So you took probably my last argument away and explained it very, very succinctly. What I have observed over the past couple of years is that increasingly individuals are behaving like institutions used to. They are moving generally towards index products as opposed to that idiosyncratic single stock risk or exposure. They are appreciating that cash settled nature. If I want to manage options exposure as opposed to sort of worrying about expiration and rolling out as 3 p.m. in Chicago approaches, that's one thing. But increasingly, people just want that options exposure, European styled, so there's no risk of early assignment. And then for a growing number of end users, at least US based taxpayers, the potential tax benefits associated with an index product like NDX as opposed to ETF alternatives, there can be meaningful tax benefits.
Yeah, 100%. 1256. It's a number that will be ingrained in my head.
Same here.
At all times. But yeah, I think the really nice thing too, speaking of managing positions with NDX and getting, the equities that make up the index itself, they have their super volatile moments. The one issue that a lot of people can run into is like you have this strangle on or iron condor on, and that specific CEO comes out and announces something, and all of a sudden your implied volatility can't account for it because it was not foreseen. But if you're in something like NDX instead, it balances it out because that one equity, even if it's a higher percentage of that product, it's not going to really like move the product itself in a big way, which gives you more management flexibility. You have less gap risk is what I'm trying to get to.
Correct.
Where if you have an iron condor or strangle or something like that, you can manage it much more easily and kind of navigate those waters without the gap up or down in the morning where, you're down up or down 20% for whatever reason.
Yeah, to your point, the Nasdaq 100 doesn't report quarterly earnings, but you do have these catalysts, whether they're Fed meetings or monthly jobs data or inflation data, where you see similar, albeit relatively muted compared to a lot of the single names that you're talking about. And I think that's increasingly appealing to a wide variety of option users.
Absolutely. Anything else you wanted to touch on for NDX relative to other products? I feel like we covered a lot.
I do too. And my sort of default goal here is to plant seeds and to make sure that audiences across the sort of spectrum, whether they're new to options or veterans, open their mind to employing the same strategies that they do elsewhere effectively in potentially a new product.
Yeah, awesome. And we were just talking a little bit earlier. I placed an NDX trade to just hedge some of the other stuff. Like I'm known as a perma bull around these parts, but I have bullish positions in equities, but I like to use NDX as kind of a hedge to the downside. So going back to the butterfly, like for me, it's a perfect strategy for my portfolio and my use case because I can put it on, I can manage the risk, and if I get that downside move, it's a nice hedge against the rest of my positions that are likely bullish and likely tech sector.
Yeah, exactly. You're never really telling somebody how to trade, but the growth in options generally is that agency that they give you, that ability to express what you would like to over a discrete time frame. And I don't think that's changing anytime soon.
Agreed. Well, thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Like this video, subscribe to the Tasty Live channel, and we'll see you next time.